Are you ready to listen to my dad Joe and Uncle Justin talk about sports? Now on with the show!
The Joe Mays and J-Raff Show is brought to you by Mays Sandwich Shop, which have been serving the greater West Lawn area delicious food for over 70 years. You are listening to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show.
Boring.
A weekly podcast about sports since 2011.
Don't you ever get tired of being wrong all the time?
With a focus on football.
36-yard line of Philly, shotgun snap to Hurts, dropping back, only one person rushing, Hurts looking, standing still, winding up, long pass that lands at the 20, no one is there, zeros on the clock, it's over, the Chiefs have won! The Chiefs have won Super Bowl 57 on a game-winning field goal, trailing at 10. At the halftime stop, 24-14, they go on to win 38-35. What a game.
Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and Justin Raffoff.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. Here we are for episode 387. I'm not alone, but I'm not with my normal co-host, Justin Raffoff. Gave him the night off. He's traveling today, coming back from rooting for his favorite college football team, the Michigan Wolverines. And there's a huge Go Blue UM guy, supporter. I'm sure he's listening to this and just really angry with me right now. No, we know Justin's a Penn State guy, but 2 years in a row now, he got tickets to the Big Ten Championship in Indianapolis, hoping maybe to get to see Penn State play. And all he got was to see Michigan win back-to-back Big Ten championships against the likes of Purdue and Iowa. So really Big Ten West mainstays out there, always popular. But no, I don't do this show on my own. You know I don't like to do that. So calling in the pinch hitter extraordinaire for us here on the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show, and always a great guest on the Bulldog Hour as well, is SV Sports and BurkeSportsReport.com, Paul Roberts. Paul, thanks for coming back.
Yeah, sure thing. And let's all be honest, if you have an opportunity to see that Iowa offense in person, who in their right mind would turn that down?
How do you not take advantage of that opportunity? Once in a lifetime to see that display, that offensive prowess, putting up 0 points in the what?
Excitement personified.
Exactly.
The Iowa offense.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the Rams, the greatest show on turf.
Yes, exactly.
Except not at all.
Perfectly. Perfect. The perfect opposite in the flesh. Man, I'm glad that the Big Ten's going away from divisions. That has gotten old real fast. We'll see what happens next year. A lot of changes coming in college football, Paul, and I think we're going to start right there.
Was there any news today in college football? I didn't hear much about it.
We can probably breeze through this pretty quickly and get to, the meat of the schedule, which obviously was Eagles-Niners, which I'm sure all of my Philadelphia brethren are looking forward to talking about after that display down in South Philly today. But
they'll be in a good mood tomorrow.
100%. I gave Justin the option because he is home, but he's relaxing. I said, hey, if you want to vent, you want to get your frustrations out, obviously we still got a mic ready for you. But he passed on that opportunity, wanted to lay low. I'm not sure he could bite his tongue enough on the show tonight. So we'll get an outsider's perspective. Paul, every time I invite you on, I always think about this because you're a journalist. You've been in the industry for a long time now. But at some point, obviously, you were a fan of. You had a fandom. I know you still root for the Orange.
Right.
An alum.
How could you tell?
Yeah.
So when we talk college football, and I mentioned this on Twitter today at Paul Roberts Cuse is where you can find me there. I don't know how much was sympathy and understanding for Florida State versus hatred/jealousy for Alabama SEC, because I think there is a lot of that out of there. But to your point, what I've always taken a lot of pride in, doing talk radio for 20 years, is being objective. I've always joked about, all the Homer J. Simpsons out there, and the same is true with sports betting, which I talk a lot about on Twitter. If you're not objective and if you're not able to take the emotion out of the equation, you're not going to be good when it comes to sports betting. And that's how I always viewed journalism. And some people have different perspectives. My job wasn't to be a cheerleader. I mean, they have cheerleaders. They're paid and they're a lot better looking than I am. My job was trying to be honest with the fans. I always thought, when I look in the mirror after a show, was I honest with the people that were listening? Or was I just trying to get clicks or be a fanboy or do Eagles chants or stuff like that? So, I'm a big 76ers fan. Love Charles Barkley. I used to watch all of those games. I'd actually, this dates me, but I remember mailing basketball cards, like hoops,
through the mail
to get them autographed.
TTM autographs
from like Barkley and the G-Man, Mike Jaminski.
Did you get them back?
Yeah, I did. Hersey Hawkins, Johnny Dawkins, Armin Gilliam, the Hammer, all those, Scotty Brooks. I mean, all those guys. Like the Flyers a lot growing up. Baseball-wise, my dad is a big Yankees fan. So all my baby pictures, my brother and I, we're all in Yankees stuff. So if you want to blame somebody about that, you can blame my dad.
That's your dad, huh?
I used to chuckle, though, when people would say that I was a bandwagon fan, because my childhood with the Yankees was Don Mattingly and a lot of scrubs. Okay, this was pre Jeter, and those guys didn't come around until early mid-90s.
It wasn't your formative years.
No.
With the
when
likes of the 90
I was
groups.
dealing with the Mel Halls, the Steve Balbonis, the Roberto Kelly, Luis Polonia, Scott Sanderson, go on and on and on. Melito and Pascual Perez. I mean, those were the Yankees that I was rooting for.
Not Jeter, Rivera, Posada.
That came
Paul
right.
O'Neill, like
I was in college when they got really good and started winning.
So, how about well, I mean, Syracuse obviously, but what about when you were growing up? Did you have a college team then? Were you always a Syracuse fan, or did that wait until later?
One of the first games I remember as a kid was Penn State Miami, when Testaverde threw, I think, 18 interceptions in the game, and then,
he's still throwing.
Then there was talk about him being colorblind, and Pete Giftopoulos, of course, made the big one at the end. So I mean.
Fiesta Bowl, the night college football went to hell. I love that article. It's a great article.
So, like, around here, obviously, you're going to get a lot of Penn State. The funny thing, though, is my twin brother, and you know what? Myself, we were Georgetown fans when it came to college basketball, and then I ended up going to Syracuse, and I don't like snow a little bit, and as a kid, I liked Georgetown, but. It was all the journalism school, trust me. My freshman year, we got 30 inches of snow in November alone. So, it wasn't for the weather that I went there.
Any longtime listeners of this show have heard this story many times, and I've probably told you, but I was at the kind of breakout game for Carmelo Anthony when they came back from down like double digits against Pitt, February 1st or 2nd, 2003, I guess that would have been. And we were walking around up there in freezing cold, just piles of snow, having no idea where we're high school kids. We were high school seniors when I was up there for that game. And I was just like, it would be interesting to be up here for school all the time. I knew I was going to Penn State, but Syracuse was, it was cool. It was great. But watching basketball in the Carrier Dome, that was bonkers.
Yeah. And then it was mobbed. So for people who haven't been there, football will run this way. And basketball, they essentially cut it in half.
Perpendicular, yeah.
But you still have some people that are actually on the other half for games when it was absolutely mobbed. And I was lucky. The years I was there, the Big East teams that came in, you'd see a star, an NBA player on almost I got to see Allen Iverson at Georgetown.
Speaking of the Georgetown connection.
I mean, it was, every team that would come in had NBA players. So I enjoyed it. It is funny, though, covering high school football around here. And sometimes you talk to people and it's, like this past Friday night covering the Wyomissing State semifinal, it was like 42, 43. The rain was annoying, but I'm like, I wasn't cold, to be honest. And then, you hear some people complain. I'm like, listen.
Yeah. It could be way worse.
Spend 4 years in upstate New York and then tell me how bad 42 with no snow is and no wind.
It's all context and perspective.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we hear about all the time when it dips down into the 50s in Florida. They're whipping out the winter jackets and gloves, and people, from up north, if you're visiting, you're in shorts and a hoodie.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
What are you used to? No. Yeah. The college stuff, college football playoff announced today. There was, I can't recall since, and I feel like I've seen written that there hasn't been so much talk about the selection process and debate since maybe the first one back in 2014. I'm trying, we're at 10 years of the CFP, and it always felt like by and large there was always a pretty clear-cut top four, or you knew who the top 2 or 3 was, and there was probably a guy at 4. The debates came later for other things that weren't as important. It was only about who's going to play or have the opportunity to play for a national championship. Well, then this year was kind of chaotic. And the one thing they couldn't have happened is exactly what happened, is Georgia on a 29-game winning streak, losing to Alabama in the SEC championship game, made their job really difficult.
Yep.
And everything else kind of went the way. Well, that's not true, because a lot of people thought Oregon was going to beat Washington, which, if that would have happened, I don't know if that would have made things more clear or more dirty. It's wild to think about it, but Florida State, minus their quarterback, he's been out now for a few weeks, had a bad ankle injury, I think it was, or lower leg injury, out for the season. He can't play anymore. They were able to get the job done against Louisville, win the ACC. Did that mostly because of their defense. They're on their third-string quarterback because their backup is in concussion protocol. But they end up going undefeated, 13-0. I feel like any other year, you would think they're probably a lock for the playoff. But because of the extenuating circumstance with the quarterback, they're the ones that get left out. They're the last team or the first team out, number 5 in the ratings. Seeing Alabama fresh off an SEC championship win over undefeated Georgia, squeeze in at 4, and Texas jump all the way up to 3. They destroyed Oklahoma State in the Big 12 championship, the last opportunity for Texas to win the Big 12. And then you have 2 undefeated teams, Michigan at 1, Washington at 2. I feel like Michigan and Washington 1-2 was the easiest thing you could possibly ask for. They both went through their seasons undefeated. They're all relatively healthy as far as the marquee positions with McCarthy and Penix. They look the part. They've been up high for a long time. That was simple. 3, 4, and then 5 and 6 is where things got really blurry, Paul. What was your take on it before the announcement and then when it came down to it? Because I'm pretty sure you said exactly what was going to happen.
Right. You asked me last night, and I had actually posted on Twitter my 4 before the Big Ten championship game was played and before the Florida State Louisville game was played. And if you made it through that 4 quarters without falling asleep, you're a big time fan, because that was a snooze fest as well. But yeah, so I had the same 4 that the committee selected today. And I understand why Florida State fans, their coach, ripped the committee. I totally understand that. And if I was a Florida State fan or a player or a coach, I would be furious. I'd be livid. But again, objectively, if the committee's job is to get the 4 best teams in now, not in November, or when Jordan Travis was healthy. And really, that's what this whole thing is about. It's all about his injury. And for people who don't follow Florida State, Jordan Travis was 20 touchdown passes, 2 interceptions this season. I mean, he's one of the best players in the country. This isn't like a game manager type quarterback here that we're talking about. He's an elite quarterback. And if you've watched them since, they're clearly not the same team. I think the Louisville game last night was just another example. I mean, that was 10-6 in the fourth quarter. I mean, if Florida State really wanted to make a statement, go out and beat Louisville by 30. It was 10-6 in the fourth quarter, and I think that goes back to the quarterback, which is kind of an important part. If you took Mahomes off the Chiefs, if you took Jalen Hurts off the Eagles, does that change things? How did the Jets look without Aaron Rodgers at quarterback?
I mean, they looked pretty good in week 1 when they beat the Bills. I got to throw that in there. Anytime the Bills lose, I like it. So but no, the Jets are terrible without him.
So that's what this whole thing is about. And I would challenge anyone who has a problem to objectively tell me that Florida State without Jordan Travis is better than Alabama. So if you had to put your house on the line, if you were wagering your home, and it's Alabama against Florida State with current quarterback situation, who is taking Florida State?
I don't think anyone is.
Yeah.
Unless they're trying to prove the Hail Mary point. They're trying to make a point. But no, you're right. And I tweeted it out, and then I was like, I better ask Paul. And then you reminded me you did tweet it out last night. But I had the exact same. My top 4 was Michigan, Washington, Texas, Alabama, as in the 4 teams that are playing the best and should have an opportunity to play for a national championship. Those are the 4 teams.
And Texas has the head-to-head
over Alabama. Right. They couldn't take Bama and not – because people would have flipped because Texas only losses to number 12 Oklahoma in the last second that was Red River shootout was fantastic again. That's their only loss. And they went to Tuscaloosa and won by 10. I know it was earlier in the year, and Alabama's not the same team. But that's what makes the playoff great is that both of them, hey, we could maybe see a rematch now that they picked those 4 teams. Those are the 4 teams that I thought were playing best at this moment. I said I thought they were still going to take Florida State over Bama. I still had Texas at 3, but I thought Florida State was going to get the 4 seed because they were a undefeated Power 5 conference champ. I thought that would still mean something because they have literally said that every single year we've done this, that conference championships matter, being undefeated matter, being from the Power 5 matters. Your non-conference slate matters. Florida State beat 2 SEC teams on the way to their 13-0 season.
Right. Although Florida is a 7-loss
not saying they beat Georgia and Alabama or anything like that.
LSU is a good win.
They beat LSU, who may now have the Heisman Trophy winner, which feels kind of weird.
Florida has 7 losses this year, and what hurts the ACC too is when you think of that conference, we think of Clemson. Clemson had 4 losses this year. Clemson lost to Duke by 3 touchdowns.
They're another team that
and I'm not talking about basketball.
Yeah.
All right. So the ACC, you can't compare. You can't compare it to the SEC. You just can't. Again, to me, it's all if Travis was healthy, they're in. There's no doubt about it. I mean, that's the whole. And injuries are taken into account. I'll go back. I mean, this is over 20 years ago, almost 25 now, from the NCAA basketball tournament. Remember when Kenyon Martin suffered a devastating leg injury? He was playing for Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. Everyone that year thought he was the best player in the country. They were winning a national title. He got hurt, and they got a 2 seed, not a 1 seed. And that was solely because of his injury. And then what happened in the tournament, they lost in the second round. They lost to Tulsa, who was coached by Bill Self at the time.
Oh, okay.
Who's now at Kansas.
Has a few,
a
couple rings for him.
But so for people who don't understand the injury factor, that's been going on for a long, long time, and that's part of the criteria. And that's what this is all about. It really is all about the injury to the quarterback. Again, I understand why Florida State fans are angry. You won every game. But if we're going to objectively ask ourselves, neutral field with this quarterback against Alabama, who wins the game? Like I said earlier, nobody is picking Florida State in that game.
Yeah, I think if you objectively look at it with the players that they can run out there right now, I think the committee got it right in that regard. I think those are probably the 4 best teams. And honestly, it doesn't matter, but I would put Georgia in front of Florida State as it's assembled in terms of the best rosters, the best teams that can be thrown out there, like you said, on a neutral field for everything, just because the Jordan Travis injury is so devastating to Florida State.
Georgia would clearly be favored, and it might be by double digits if they played Florida State. This is the one thing I'll say, though, about that. Florida State won its conference. Georgia did not.
Correct.
So it's not just one thing. Sometimes people want to look at just like one criteria. It's a combination of things. So that's why I understand Florida State over Georgia. They did not win their conference.
No, and in the end, it doesn't really matter because 5 and 6 don't get to play for a national championship. They're actually playing each other.
They are playing, and Georgia's a huge favorite.
Huge favorite. Yeah. So, which kind of just proves my point that they could have easily been the 5. Florida State could have dropped even farther. But I won't say that they're lucky to be number 5 because in the end, that doesn't matter. They were obviously going to a New Year's Six bowl. That was going to happen. They're not going to drop them to some nobody bowl, the Cheez-It Bowl or whatever, just because they were still going to get to play in a nice bowl. But obviously they wanted
the Weed Eater Bowl,
right? They wanted attempting to win a national championship. I know my co-host Justin responded to because I know you were posting stuff on Twitter, and I know some people were responding to you, and he was one of them. And I already kind of said this, but he said this to you. My bigger issue is that Bama is better. Isn't that Bama is better? They are, in his opinion, but rather that the committee openly changes its priorities regarding criteria whenever it changes, and they typically don't do a great job of explaining their reasoning. So, and then someone else said, because I know there's a lot of journalists that I saw, up in arms about this process, and I get it. Then there are some, like you talked about Kirk Herbstreit, was it Reese Davis?
Reese Davis, right.
Also laying it out there why it sucks for Florida State, but it's also okay. And in the end, the College Football Playoff Committee was there to put the best teams there, and because of the injury, they didn't feel that Florida State belonged in that group. It sucks because of the 13-0 Power 5 conference champ, but that's the way we're ending the CFP era.
Right.
And all this did was reinforce to me that we needed a larger playoff because I've been saying been saying 16 teams since the late 90s when the BCS crap was starting.
Right.
Because that was terrible. I hated the BCS. The 2 teams just wasn't enough. No. We finally got to 4 teams. It took, 17 years or whatever it was. And here we are a decade later saying goodbye to the 4-team CFP, probably at the right time after the way this went down. I know some people are like, just keep it at 8. I would love 16. I think that's the perfect number for football. I don't want any more than that because even at 16, you're pushing into possibly some 3-loss teams or maybe a 4-loss team that won a conference championship, which that's a whole separate thing. Are those even necessary anymore? But we are getting a 12-team playoff next year, which will be awesome. I'm very much looking forward to that because this type of debate doesn't matter. Your debates now are teams that have 3-ish losses that can you really be that upset if they're not the 12 seed? I guess the 12 seed this year would have been 10-2. Probably, but it's a lot easier. The teams that have 1 loss or are undefeated, they're getting in.
Right.
That's the way it should be.
Imagine a world, Joe, where there actually was a college playoff.
Right. Yeah. It's almost like the FCS and Division II and Division 3.
Man.
It'd be amazing. They should do something like that and then report back to Big Boy College Football and let them know if that works.
Yeah. Congrats, by the way, to Kutztown University,
absolutely.
Golden Bears.
Final 4.
Marching on. Yeah, that's incredible.
Talk about, and I saw this out there from a couple accounts saying, you thought people were talking about how some of the stuff in the PIAA, the state playoffs, probably not just football, probably all of them, the PIAA could do a better job at some of these things. And then the NCAA comes in and, hold my beer, let me show you how to mess things up. Because not just the CFP stuff, but you have with Kutztown, some you have to bid to host the game. It doesn't just go to, it was some wacky thing between Slippery Rock and Kutztown. The administration at Kutztown didn't submit to host. It was something weird. In the end, it doesn't matter, though, because Kutztown won. Yeah. So happy for them. I didn't get to Kutztown at all this year, but I've been up a few times to watch former Wilson players up there, which is always great. And it's cool. Under Reed Stadium's a cool place to watch college football. So
yeah, I was just there for YMCA.
Oh, yeah, that's where the Northwestern Ohio game was. Yep. So. Yeah, I don't know, Paul. What's your final thoughts then on the CFP, or how about give us predictions? Who you think wins the 1-4 and 2-3 matchups?
I saw Michigan is a 2-point favorite against Alabama. To be honest,
the Rose Bowl.
I'm not sure which are which.
I think it is.
Yeah, I just viewed them as semifinals. And then Texas, I think, is -4, 4.5. Against Washington. By the way, I did hear Reese Davis say that if Penix Jr. was hurt, that he thought Washington would not get in either. So just kind of make the case that this wasn't an anti-Florida State issue, that it's really just about the quarterback. I actually lean to Alabama. I know Michigan's undefeated. Their defense is really, really good. But I would lean a little bit to Alabama and Texas. Well, I don't have, honestly, I don't have a play. Sometimes your best play is no play. I don't have a strong feeling. We'll see how the line moves there. I don't really have a strong feeling on that game.
I know a lot of people were very surprised with the way Washington-Oregon went down. Oregon at one point I think was a 9.5 point favorite, maybe even 10.5 at some, depending on where you were looking.
Yeah,
but they were a pretty big favorite. So Washington to win that outright by, what was it, 3? They went 34-31 or something.
And I think if Washington lost, I don't know that at the Pac-12 gets anybody.
You don't think Oregon sneaks in there?
I mean, they still had a loss.
Do you think so? Here we go. This would be interesting. If Oregon beats Washington, you think that knocks them both out, which frees up Texas at 2, Bama at 3. But do they put Georgia in at 4 then? And we have the same thing?
I think if that's the case, they may have given it to Florida State.
You think it might have gone to Florida State then?
Maybe.
I
don't think Alabama beating Georgia, that is a huge win. I mean, you're talking about beating
a team on a 29-game winning streak, back-to-back national champs.
That's loaded with NFL players. I would have been. I think Florida State, though, to me, would have had a better chance if Oregon
beat Washington.
Won. Yeah. Because then Washington for sure is not getting in.
Right, yeah. If Washington loses to Oregon, they're not in.
Then the question then becomes Oregon. But is an Oregon win over Washington as impressive as Alabama beating Georgia?
Well,
no.
That was another question I know that came up to you about the strength of the Pac-12. And I thought I was hearing that this was a great year for the Pac-12.
A lot of people thought that,
because I thought Oregon State, they were good. They weren't
at home,
but they were very good.
Especially at home, they're tough.
I know it was a down year for USC, but they were still They defensively challenged, but offensively electric.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Utah was still very good. Maybe not as good as people thought they would be, but still a very good team.
Pac-12 compared to the ACC, no question, Pac-12 is better.
Well, think back in September, Colorado was winning national championships in September. So,
when are they playing?
Yeah. They're not.
They're not in. They didn't get in the semifinals.
No, man, that is wild.
Are they in a New Year's Day bowl?
They're in the toilet bowl right now. The way they're hemorrhaging coaches and losing commitments, and
We should mention real quick, by the way, Penn State is going to play Ole Miss.
Yeah, that's how I wanted to
December
wrap-
30th at noon.
wanted to wrap up the college talk by talking about the Nittany Lions. First time ever Penn State's playing in the Peach Bowl, and I saw that they could be the first team to win every New Year's Six Bowl if they win the Peach Bowl. So kind of interesting, does it mean anything? No, not really, but it would be cool. I look forward to that graphic should they win. First team to win all 6 bowls, because you always got to be recruiting and promoting the brand.
And Big Ten SEC, and we're going to see that with Missouri and Ohio State.
Yeah. And
it's interesting how you got conference matchups there. I watched Ole Miss a couple times this year. Offensively, it's
this is a
going to be
Lane
good.
Kiffin team.
Yeah, it'll be a good matchup because they really go up and down the field, and Penn State, we know, has not a good, an elite defense.
Yeah, I think they were
national
number 2 in stop
championship
rate.
type defense.
Yeah, Manny Diaz's crew has been fantastic both years he's been there. I'd hate to see him go. We'll see what happens with him, but it is interesting. I like the Ohio State, Missouri, and Penn State Ole Miss matchups because it helps talk a little bit more about the strength of those two conferences. The two biggest and best in terms of money and TV deals. I would like to see the play on the field emulate that, mimic those expectations. And of course, I hate to root for Ohio State, but I want the Big Ten to look good. So I want them to beat Missouri, and obviously I want Penn State to beat Ole Miss. But I saw people talking today about how they're shocked that Penn State was one of those teams that they felt Oklahoma got snubbed.
I real quick on Ohio State, when they revealed the matchups and put the graphics up, did you know Ohio State is 2-12 against the SEC in bowl games?
2-12, yeah.
That is wild.
Not a great look.
No,
No.
it's not. Now, some motivation plays a big factor in bowls. Okay, so let's look at Florida State now. I mean, those kids are
going
devastated.
to be amped. They're going to be amped, I think.
But I don't know. I could see it be the other way.
You think they're going to?
Like, we were supposed to be playing for a national title, and now we have.
You don't think they want to pull like the Boise State, us against the world type mentality?
But Boise State's like they're not a power.
They were happy to be there.
They were more in the mid-major role of like trying to slay Goliath. Florida State's not.
You don't see Florida State pulling that against Georgia, and then someone proposing to their girlfriend on the sideline.
But at the same time, for Georgia. Like, I don't know that they're motivated either, because they're used to be playing for titles.
Well, so I look at these New Year's Six games, especially now. We heard it from the Penn State players last year. The Rose Bowl was still a draw. It's if we don't make the college football playoff, if I'm picked for the Rose Bowl, I'm still playing, which everyone did except Joey Porter Jr. and Parker Washington, though he was injured at the time anyway, so it didn't matter. But everyone else that was, even if they were going to the NFL, they still played in the game. The Rose Bowl is now a part of the CFP this year in that rotation, so there's no draw for that. You were going to be playing no matter what because it's a college football playoff game. Are we going to see a ton more sit out because of it? And then how does that impact the plans for New Year's Six? I'll be interested to hear over in the next week. I'm guessing you're going to hear about guys.
Yeah, I think a lot
away.
of that depends on where you're projected to go in the draft. If this is it, if you're not a pro and you're not gonna be drafted, you play.
Well,
if you think you're gonna get drafted.
For Georgia, they said they couldn't see Brock Bowers playing in the game.
Yeah, plus he's been hurt. He's
been hurt this year.
Yeah. So all right, so I just have the lines now.
Okay.
We'll play a game, Joe, called Guess the Line.
Oh boy.
So
I'm not gonna be good at this.
Well, you never know. So we have Penn State, Ole Miss.
All right.
Who do you think's favored and by how much?
Oh boy. I don't think it's going to be by a lot. I would say probably 2.5 to 3.5. My question is, which team is it going to? I would know
that.
I would hope it's Penn State, especially because they are ranked higher. But I know that doesn't necessarily mean anything in that way. So I'll say I'll say Penn State minus 2.5.
You're close. That was
Okay.
good. It's Penn State 3.5.
3.5.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's not too bad.
No. Ohio State, Missouri.
Oh boy.
Now you know who's favored here.
Yeah, Ohio State's
Right.
favored.
So now the question is how much?
yeah, how much is that going to be? So Ohio State is, what are they, 7? Missouri's not. They're not that far away. in
No.
AP.
Should I play the Jeopardy music?
Yeah. No, I'll say 4.5.
Close. 6.5.
Okay, it's a
Ohio
little
State.
higher than I thought.
And then here's just one more to kind of prove a point we've been discussing. Georgia, Florida State. What do you think the line
Georgia
is?
is definitely favored, and I'm gonna say 8.5.
Now this one it's 13.5.
13.5.
Which goes to my point
Oh.
about this.
Oh
This
my,
goes
wow.
to my point about best.
I was thinking
team.
of saying 9.5, and I was like, no, that's pretty high.
Yeah,
Oh,
13.5.
13.5. Whoa, man.
Yeah. So if people out there don't understand, how important Jordan Travis is to that team, and if you watched Eagles Niners today, and you saw what the line was there when people were aghast that the Eagles wouldn't be favorite at home, how did that turn out? So
yeah, not great.
Yeah.
Not great. Oh, Coach Steve is watching us. Coach O'Neill.
Oh yeah.
He's saying go Packers. He's a huge Broncos fan, so anytime he can watch the Chiefs lose is a good night for him.
Money, by the way, is coming in on Michigan here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
what's
it's
that
down
one
to
at?
1.5.
1.5.
Yeah, Michigan's fair by 1.5. Texas, this hasn't changed yet. It is 4.5. Texas is favored. What's interesting there, the total in that game is 64.
Woo.
It's going to be an arena game right there.
But I'm sure that's what everyone wants. I mean, as much as we talk about loving hard hitting, smash mouth defense, the offense putting points on the board is what everyone wants to see
Yeah.
for television ratings and for enjoyment at parties and whatnot. So, all right, that's interesting. It sucks that Florida State was left out, but I understand why it happened. I
Right.
feel like that's where I'm at. Do I hear the people complaining about it? Yes. Do I also hear people saying, well, Bama is most likely the better team? I understand that too. I like to, in my wise old age as I've gotten to this now and try to be more level-headed with my fandom, I try to look at it. If Penn State was either of those teams, how would I feel? If Penn State was 13-0 and undefeated, I would be livid right now. And I don't like the Seminoles in any capacity. They've never were one of my favorites. Probably one of my favorite Penn State memories watching Penn State beat them in 3 overtimes at the Orange Bowl, which I just talked about with my wife this afternoon. But I look at it, that sucks. Like if Penn State was 13-0 and left out because their quarterback was injured,
Right.
I would be going nuclear right now. Like that would be. I mean, I was pissed off a bit. I can't believe 7 years ago when Penn State was Big Ten champ and beat Ohio State head to head, but was left out of the playoff.
Right.
But at that, Penn State had 2 previous losses. They looked poor at the beginning. They kind of are sort of like Bama this year in that they hit a stride as the season went on and just kept getting better, upset Ohio State, then came back and won the Big Ten. And we thought there was a possibility they could sneak into the playoff. Didn't happen. And then they had that electric, crazy showing against Darnold and USC where Saquon looked like a freaking machine. Ended up losing that Rose Bowl, unfortunately. But I think back to that and how much it sucked to get left out then when, you're watching a team that you just beat
Right.
go to the playoff over you. But
Yeah. The big difference, obviously, this year is that Florida State is undefeated.
right, yeah,
And that's,
absolutely. That's what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
you go undefeated and beat that team, win the conference, and you don't make it. It just sucks. But same thing, like Alabama has gotten so much better as the year went on. They looked poor early in the year. They got so much better. I can't say they always won in convincing fashion, but they always won. I know people point to the Auburn game needing a last
How
second
wild was
sneak.
that? Yeah.
Like, just think of how crazy different things would be if they would have lost to Auburn. They wouldn't have even been in the conversation.
No.
I don't even think it would have mattered if they beat Georgia. Would they
No,
still be playing in that game?
then you have another
If
loss.
they lost to Auburn, would they still be playing in that game?
I'm
'Cause
not
I'm trying to think the way the divisions work if they would have still. But if they would have beaten Georgia after losing to Auburn, I don't think Bama makes it. I think Florida State's probably that team in there.
Yeah, because now you're talking 2 losses.
Right.
For Alabama.
Yeah.
And Auburn is not good. So.
No. They have not been. They have not been. I mean, they lost by a lot to New Mexico State, who's not a bad team. They had a good year this year as well. I think they were, 10-3?
Yeah.
They win their conference.
But SEC teams losing to New
don't
Mexico.
Lose by 20 points or whatever to New
Not
Mexico
a good
State.
look.
No, it's very, very weird. Just think they basically ran Bo Nix out of there too, and look what he was able to do at Oregon the last 2 years.
Yeah,
because he was the quarterback when Penn State beat him in 2021.
Yeah.
2020 and 2021. No, 21 and 22.
He got a lot of heat down there.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
And look what he turned into.
Now it's Heisman candidate.
Right.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that's it for college football talk. Let's move on to the NFL. I said it to you, Paul, before we started here. Well, it hasn't really been a great week of matchups. Some games have gone down to the wire. I can't say it was great football. A lot of sloppiness. A lot of terrible quarterback play. not great for some of these teams. A lot of botched snaps and things like that happening as I was watching.
Block punts.
That was the Colts. Titans game was bonkers.
2 of them. Yeah.
2 block punts gave 10 points to the Colts, who ended up winning in overtime. But, I mean, the punter got injured on the one. Illegal play. It wasn't dirty or anything because the guy literally almost took the ball out from his foot, but then, inverted his knee. It looked really hyperextended it for sure, and he did not return. But Colts won that one in overtime. You mentioned the Thursday night game was probably the best matchup, best game between the Cowboys and Seahawks. That went Dallas's way, much to the chagrin of probably most of the people listening to this show. I was happy with my fantasy quarterback, Dak Prescott. Couldn't get one more yard, though, Dak. 299.
Oh,
that's
no bonus for you.
No bonus. I said that's a 4-point swing, and I'm in a battle right now with my uncle to win this week. I'm currently up 7.5, but those 4 points would have been great because he's still got Evan Ingram to go.
Okay. Could be a bad
but
beat
I got
your way.
I got Calvin Ridley and the Jags defense tomorrow night.
Oh, they should be in good
I
shape.
think I'm okay, but I left Puka Nacua on the bench.
He got hurt today.
Yeah, he did his ribs, but he had put up over 100 yards and a touchdown.
Joe doesn't care that he's injured.
I hope he's back for
as
next
long
week.
as he got my fantasy team points.
But, it's I don't want to see anyone injured, but if you're going to get injured, do it after you put up 100 yards and a touchdown. That's much better. Because we saw someone else get injured early, and I was like, oh, that's a huge bummer for anyone that had him in fantasy. You get hurt early in the game.
The guy's legs in 2 pieces. But
did you see that guy on the sideline in the Saints game?
Yeah.
The one of the official. I don't know if he was a yard guy or what, but his leg did not look great.
No,
it was
disgusting. I think people don't really understand how freakish these athletes are.
It's absurd.
Because when you're watching TV, they all look kind of the same because they're all that big.
Right.
But if you or I stood next to them,
oh my gosh!
I played in some charity basketball games against the Eagles a couple years, and Lane Johnson. It was
6'7"?
but the way they move, their feet and stuff, at well over 300 pounds, it's scary how those guys move like that. And he wasn't the only one, but when you see him on TV, it's just giant against giant. So the
context isn't there.
Same with the NBA, right? If a 6'8" guy is guarding a 6'9" guy, it doesn't stand out on TV because they're similar. But if they're standing against a 5'9" person, then you really notice.
It's I always think about that picture of is it Derrick Henry standing with Mark Ingram at the coin toss. Mark Ingram is a huge guy by your average standards. Mark Ingram is a big dude,
strong,
and Derrick Henry just towers over him.
But
I know forced perspective's a little bit at work there, but it's still insane.
Yeah, and my point is for those people on the sideline, you don't get how quickly they're on top
think about
of you.
the size and speed that's coming at you, the force that is about to be exerted on you, and sometimes you just can't get out of the way fast enough. And unfortunately, that's what happened for some sideline official because he had the black and white on, but also something yellow on. So I think he was part of the lines crew or something like that. and his leg got beat up pretty
Yeah.
good. I felt really bad for him right away. And Alvin Kamara, who hit him, kind of was like, "I want to help you, but I can't stop." Like, and there was an EMS person like standing right there with him, so he immediately got on his
Yeah,
thing.
you could sometimes you can.
Yeah, it was not great. But
Yeah.
you and I have covered plenty of high school stuff. You've covered more basketball than me, but that's usually where I'm like, these kids are huge. And then I'm thinking, like, as you move up in levels, you go to college, then you go to pros, they just keep getting bigger.
I mean, and even like why I'm missing, for example, is a AAA school, and we're seeing 300-pound kids. I mean,
It is nutty. I mean, Coach O'Neill's listening, and I just would like to know where he's finding the Jevin Williams and the Caleb Brewer.
What's in the
and
water over
what's
there?
in the water and why I'm missing right now? Because, man, that was some beef to watch the last few years.
Yeah.
Just insanity to see the talent that they had over there, starting with the line.
But even on Instagram and Twitter now, I started a segment this year called "Look Out SV
right.
Sports
That's
Paul" to
right.
show people like how close, because you want to get the shot, right? Like that's priority number one. But sometimes they're on top of you really quick, and that's at the high school level. Now multiply that by 10, 20 times when you have these guys who are 250 pounds that are still running 4.4 and 4.5. Like you see a DK Metcalf or an AJ Brown. These guys are huge and can run like that. And if you're on the sideline,
you take it from them, it's gonna do some damage.
So hopefully that guy's already. I'm actually surprised it doesn't happen more often.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you see it more often with media in like the end zones, like when they're going on a fade or something like that. I don't recall it happening too often on the sidelines because a lot of those are team personnel. Their coaches, their players are paying attention.
Security.
Or
like
security
Big Dom.
getting in the way.
Anything happen with him today?
No, I don't think so. But I never really worried about my health. I mean, maybe I should more so, being very close to the action. What I'm more concerned about is my camera, because that getting damaged would not be good for me for picture purposes or making money.
These cameras aren't cheap.
No, they are not. But I didn't feel any real fear being out there until my 10-year-old daughter was on the sideline as a volunteer student in training, athletic trainer with Kieran and the gang. And at that point, I was hyper aware of where she was at all times, because I was like, oh my gosh, these are, people that are almost double her age, that if they run into her, she's going to go flying. Thankfully, that didn't happen.
Good.
She'll be making an appearance at a couple basketball games this winter in the same capacity. So I'll have to see if my stress and anxiety level goes through the roof like it did during Friday Night Football. But
usually you don't see people flying into the bleachers.
Not as bad in basketball.
Should be okay.
Yeah, I think she'll be all right.
Don't go to a Pistons game.
We don't need anyone going into the stands.
Pistons, Pacers,
haymakers.
I would avoid.
So Packers right now are up 14-6, Paul. They also have the ball as we're approaching halftime. The biggest game on the NFL Sunday slate was 49ers at Eagles.
Oh, yeah.
It was a rematch of last year's NFC Championship game. There had been so much talk by the teams, mostly the 49ers, that if the playing field was level, as in Purdy could play the whole game last year, they felt that it would have been a better game or that they were the better team. And they've said that a lot all offseason and this season leading up to this game. And Philadelphia fans are level-headed, and they took that in stride. Didn't have any issues with any of that. But this game was built up as the game of the year.
They weren't upset either that Vegas made them a home underdog. Yeah.
But it's almost like Vegas knows what they're talking about, because the Eagles, outside of maybe the first quarter, didn't look great. It went downhill for them as soon as they couldn't get in the end zone. When they started settling for field goals, that's where it went downhill. And I saw someone say basically the 49ers spotted them a quarter and still were able to do what they did with them in the next three quarters.
-6 yards for San Francisco in the first quarter.
So, yeah, and what's the final score?
42-19?
42-19, okay. And everyone that the Eagles fans didn't want to see do well did well. Brock Purdy had a great game. Deebo Samuel scoring touchdowns. He was one of the guys definitely running his mouth over the last 9-10 months, all about that the 49ers were better, and we'll see what happens. Now, it's obviously not a death blow because Philadelphia is 10-2, still has a game lead. They're still in the middle of that gauntlet schedule. They got to go to Dallas next week, who I believe Dallas is favored by
a field goal.
It's at home, so that's not surprising. Dallas has won a bunch of games in a row in Dallas, and Dak looks pretty good. And I know Eagles fans like to sell Dak and the Cowboys short, but I don't think that's the right thing to do at this moment after San Francisco just came in and did that to you at home. Obviously, there's a Jalen Hurts injury. I don't know how bad that is.
Yeah, he came back out. And I'm not sure why. I actually heard Sirianni's post-game comments because he was asked. At first, he said it was a 2-score game, and then the reporter actually corrected him and said, "No,
it's not.
It was not a 2-score game." And then Sirianni quickly fired back, something to the effect of, "We play to win." But I know a lot of people were questioning why is the franchise
attitude,
quarterback in the game at that point.
When he's already been dinged up. I like the grit and the determination and always feeling like you're in it and have something to play for. But at some point, you got to just move on to the next one. This one didn't go your way.
Yeah.
Who cares? It's just one regular season game. You have plenty of time. And Justin and I talk about this all the time. In any sport, if you're playing a team, your conference, division, whatever, the one in the regular season doesn't necessarily mean much if you get the best of them later.
Exactly.
For the longest time, Justin and I were talking about in regards to Wilson football when Wilson was winning all those league games in a row. And we knew Township was going to be a problem. And we're driving down to Manheim. We're like, if you could beat them once this season, which would you pick? Would you pick the regular season to continue the streak, but then you lose in the playoffs and your season's over? Or would you rather end the streak, which in the end is meaningless stat? It's cool, but who cares? You want to keep playing football. And we said without hesitation, you want to win the playoff game.
Right.
I'm not going to keep something meaningless going and then give up my season.
Yeah. This was the perfect storm for the Niners to win. Okay, 3 factors. The revenge, which we pointed out from last year's playoff game.
They had something to prove.
The extra rest. They hadn't played since Thanksgiving. And 3, and extra rest and extra time to prepare. And Kyle Shanahan is a very good coach. And 3, the Eagles' schedule. They had just gone to Kansas City and then had an overtime game against Buffalo. Those are all-in type of games. And that is precisely why the sports books made the Niners the favorite. It wasn't that they hate the Eagles or there's this conspiracy against Philadelphia.
Trust me, no one's out to get Philadelphia. I've been told now many times on the internet that they're America's team now. So, it was
those 3 factors. I mean, that was the whole rationale. And since the game ended, I haven't heard anything about how disrespectful that line was, making the Niners the favorite in the game. And having said that, as bad as it looked today, and the tackling today was putrid, the 49ers, they scored every time they were in the red zone. They were 4 for 4 in the red zone, 456 yards in the game. And you mentioned some of the key players. Purdy throws for 314, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. He was only sacked twice. McCaffrey, 93 yards and a score. He also had 3 catches. Debo, 116 yards, 2 scores on 4 catches. Kittle, 4 catches for 68. Ayuk had 5 catches for 46. That team has a ton of weapons, and their defense is loaded. I mean, their linebackers, now Greenlaw, that's a different topic, but he got ejected. Yeah, but I mean, him and Warner, they add Chase Young. They already had Bosa. I mean, it's a really good defense. As bad as it looked today, and I know Eagles fans are angry, it's one game in early December. You still have the edge for home field advantage. It's only the second loss. Everything aligned perfectly for the Niners. And the professional bettors that I know were all over. This was like a game of the year situational spot for these guys. They were all on the 49ers, which is why it actually opened at 1, and then it ended up getting up to 3, which is a big jump in the NFL because 3 is such a key number. But having said that, the Eagles are still one of the best teams in the NFL. So this is not the end of the world. The sky isn't falling. The apocalypse is not here. They're still a really good team. I wouldn't be surprised if we see these two again in the NFC Championship game.
Do you think, because you're going to hear it at some point, either you're going to see it on Twitter or you're going to hear it on talk radio, is the Cowboys game now a must-win this week?
Oh, God. No, it is not a must. It's a big game. It's not a must win. And I wouldn't be shocked at all if the Eagles could go down there and win.
No, I wouldn't either.
In a big spot, who would you rather have at quarterback, Hurts or Dak? And Dak's playing real well. The Cowboys also have a tendency to beat up on bad football teams. And how about the way Seattle moved the football against that Dallas defense?
Yeah.
I mean, the Cowboys defense did not, and Seattle's offense is not a juggernaut. And it really is. Look at them the week before, and then look at them against Dallas. So that's a bit of a red flag Dallas is still really good. The question for the Eagles, and we've seen Howie Roseman try to make moves during the year, he knows there are holes in their defense. Their linebackers aren't strong, and the secondary has major question marks.
Safety, yeah.
And look at San Fran, look at the weapons they have at receiver, and Dallas has, CeeDee Lamb. Yeah, I still don't. People may want to put the Lions in that same category. I'm not willing to go there.
No.
Goff, I
think 49ers, Eagles, Cowboys are a step above. I'd put, I'd say Philly and San Francisco are 1A, Dallas is 1B, Detroit's 2. Yeah, I feel like there's a little bit of a drop off there. As much as I would love to see Detroit make some noise, they didn't look great on Thanksgiving against Green Bay. That was kind of pitiful. We've already seen them lose to Seattle this year. They got destroyed by Baltimore. Mm-hmm. They looked crappy outside of the first quarter against the Saints today. Like, they're lucky they got spotted 21 points.
Yeah.
So as much as I want to see Detroit make it happen, I do hope they win at least a playoff game to give them something to build on for next year. I'm afraid that it's just not quite there. I feel like too much over the last few weeks we've seen the bad Goff come out. And if he's turning the ball over, it's going to be tough for them to win.
I think, if you're doing power rankings, you go Niners, Eagles, Cowboys, Lions. Yep. And Cowboys fans may say that they should be number 2. But again, objectively.
Well, they can prove it this week.
Yeah.
You win this week. I don't know that you have much of an argument.
You flip-flop, right.
At the way they're playing currently, I would put Dallas at 2 if they beat the Eagles this coming week.
But this is not the end of the season for the Niners are a really, really good team. I mean, they have a good chance to not just get to the Super Bowl, but win it. So as bad as it looked, the NFL, I say this all the time, it is a week-to-week league. Teams the worst thing you can do is watch a team the week before and assume
that's the same team you're going to
get. That's not how the NFL works.
So the Eagles, like we've said multiple times, they still control their own destiny. They win out. They go 15-2. You're the 1 seed. Now they've got 2 tough games, to finish this 7-game stretch of really good teams that they're playing, which they've beaten all but 1 now. Since their loss to the Jets, they rattled off 6 wins in a row or something, 5 wins in a row, 6 out of 7,
still
whatever.
Shocking to me they lost to the Jets.
Yeah, to Zach Wilson.
And that was all. And we praise Hurts. That was all Hurts. I mean, the turnovers you just can't. That's the first stat I look at anytime I'm looking at a box score, and he just just gave the ball away.
Well, and that's Josh Allen's problem in Buffalo.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the Eagles we talked about, they go to Dallas this week. Dallas coming off a larger break since they played on Thursday. So they get a well-rested, well-prepared Dallas, as much as a Dallas team can be prepared when Mike McCarthy is the head coach, because I know there's some people that really don't like Mike McCarthy.
And in a revenge spot because they lost the last time.
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll see what comes of that. Then they got Seattle, who Philadelphia is, to me, easily the better team there.
I agree.
But Seattle is an up and down team. They can be super tough. They can have a great defense. Like you said, week to week, they can have a great defense one week. Geno Smith can look like comeback player of the year, top 10 quarterback. And then another week you see, I understand why he's on his third team and been a career backup, So we'll see what Seattle team you get. After that, though, they've got winnable games left against, Arizona, and 2 against the Giants or something like that. Their last 3 games are gimme wins if you don't screw it up.
Yeah, this is U.S. is it must win. I don't think it's must win, but it's definitely the most important game, the one coming up here with Dallas. So after Dallas,
They got
Seattle on the road,
then the
home
Giants.
Giants, home Arizona, at Giants.
Right, so those last 3 games should be wins. There's no.
How about, by the way, what Arizona did to the Steelers? Now everyone knows the Steelers are a fraud, right?
Yeah,
you're
thinks they're
outgained in like every game. I mean, their offense is just.
I'm happy for Mike Tomlin that he's going to continue that streak. I'm sure he's going to get to at least 9 wins. I mean, he's sitting at 7-5. I would hope you'd be able to get to 9 wins. But I don't think anyone thinks that they were going to make noise in the playoffs.
But to lose by 2 touchdowns to Arizona, that was bad. I mean,
Jonathan Gannon special. Kyler Murray running around doing his crazy stuff. That's an interesting situation. We'll see what happens with Murray and the Cardinals after this year. But San Francisco, on the other hand, has Seattle this week. Then they have Arizona before hosting Baltimore. That's a huge game in week 16 on Christmas night.
Wow.
That's in San Francisco. Baltimore at San Francisco.
There's going to be a lot of unhappy family members that don't appreciate that the football fans in the household aren't focusing on the kids or the relatives or the aunt and uncle that traveled 5 hours to be there because that is a monster game.
Huge game for 2 of the better teams in the NFL. Inter-conference game, so could be a little bit bigger if it was AFC or NFC, but still a huge game on Christmas night. And then San Francisco finishes with Washington and the Rams the last 2 weeks. So I would say
Rams have been better than I thought they would be.
Yes,
to be
I
honest.
completely agree.
They're not as good as the Niners. But,
I feel like the last 5 weeks, though, is a strength of schedule push for both the Eagles and the 49ers. And honestly, I might favor the Eagles just because they get the Giants twice. Whereas
but they have to go to Dallas.
They have to go to
and
Dallas.
And San Fran gets Baltimore at home.
Right. But they both get Seattle. So that's a push there.
But the Niners
they both
will
get the Cardinals, too.
Niners will be favored in every game.
Yeah, and the Eagles will be
not.
in everyone except Dallas.
Right.
So we'll see, but the Eagles know what they can do.
And then the tiebreaker would be Niners because they beat them today.
Is head-to-head the first tiebreaker, or does it go by conference?
Good question. I thought it was head-to-head.
I thought it was too, but then I thought maybe that has something to do with division. Like, the NFL tiebreaking procedures, I always feel like they head-to-head to me should always be the first tiebreaker. If people are tied, which of those teams won? That feels like the natural tiebreaker. But at some point, I don't know if it's when you're talking conference rankings or seeding, or if you're talking division. At some point, head-to-head is not the first criteria in the NFL, because I feel like that came up in the last few years when Justin and I were talking about playoff seeding, and maybe if it's just a 3-way tie, the head-to-head gets thrown out because that you have the round robin situation. How do you figure? I forget exactly how that works, but I feel like
okay. Here we go. 2 clubs. Number 1 is head-to-head. Okay. This is to break a tie within division.
Within division, right?
2 clubs. I think this is just I think this is two clubs not in the division. It says head-to-head if applicable.
Okay, so
is number 1.
Okay.
Yeah, and then 2 is best winning percentage in games played within the conference. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's head-to-head and then conference.
All right.
Yep.
All right. So, but is the sky falling? No. Are there things to work on? Yeah, but we've been saying this. Justin and I had this conversation last week. This Eagles team is not as crisp as the one last year. The last one still had their issues, but I feel like they've been more pronounced this year. There was some roster turnover. There was obviously assistant coaching turnover. We've seen them be playing from behind and usually pulling it out over this stretch of tough games.
Yeah,
They've been
down at halftime 5 games in a row, which is
and until today they had won all of them.
Yeah.
So, it's glass half full, glass half empty. You don't know what you're going to get. I don't think this Eagles team is as good as they were last year, but I don't know that across the board the NFL has these great teams.
No
one steps up. For a while it looked like the 49ers were great. Then they had a 3-game losing streak. Now they come in and beat up on the Eagles. Over in the AFC, who's stepping up over there? We thought it was the Ravens. We think right now maybe it's the Ravens. Chiefs are still hanging around, but obviously are not the team they've been over the last 4 years or so.
Yeah, and what's funny about that situation is the defense is actually pretty good this year.
Right.
Usually you
It's
viewed the defense as the
flip-flop.
weakness. Now the offense has been the problem.
We don't know what to expect, I feel like, week to week at Jacksonville, because I feel like Trevor Lawrence is almost similar to Geno Smith. It's very back and forth. You don't know what you're going to get. They played the Chiefs hard last year in the divisional round. They shouldn't have probably even got out of the wild card round against the Chargers.
Yeah. Chargers gonna Chargers.
And then, last thing I'll say is I don't know what to expect from my Dolphins, because they still haven't beaten a team with a winning record now that Denver lost today and is back, I think, at 500. So, they are kind of like, I know people were joking about Dallas, Miami on Christmas Eve is the two great teams that can only beat bad teams playing each other. So Miami's got a couple weeks until they play Dallas. They have a tough last three games. They have Dallas, Baltimore, Buffalo. So I said,
where's the Buffalo game at?
It's in Miami though, because
Okay.
they lost
Big
at
difference.
Buffalo.
Yeah.
So they host Dallas, go to Baltimore, host Buffalo the weeks 16, 17, 18. So they still have. So where are we at now? We're 12 games in, right? They're 9-3. So they have what? Three more games? 2 more games before that 3-game stretch.
Yeah.
They got to win these next 2 because they were winnable games. One's against the Jets. You got to beat the Jets.
You mentioned Dolphins Cowboys.
That's
I'm
Christmas
thinking
Eve.
what the total is going to be in that game. Like I can see that as being like 35-31.
Yeah.
I can just see track.
You're setting a line like 64.5. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's not a Big 12 game.
Okay. 52.5.
I think it. Yeah. I think it'd be high.
54.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, Paul, I appreciate you pinch hitting here and joining
it was
us.
Fun.
I asked you weeks ago if you would be able to do this, not even thinking that we'd have the CFP to talk about, and knowing that it was going to be Niners Eagles. So that worked out really well. We would have had fun talking about whatever sports betting and NFL action's always fun, but this definitely gave us some juicy stuff to give our takes on. And always appreciate you coming on the show. And we'll look forward to doing it again sometime. Maybe we'll have you on in January for some NFL playoffs or college football playoff action will still be going on in early January. So we'll see all this hot air that's been pushed around today across the internet, how much of it stands up and looks after we get these games actually played. We'll see what happens. But yeah. So you can check out Paul, SV Sports, BerkSportsReport.com for everything that Paul's doing in the greater Berks County area. I know you're not limited to just Berks. I feel like you're Chester, Montgomery, Lancaster, Lebanon, Schuylkill.
Yeah.
You're really expanding the SV Sports footprint in terms of high school sports coverage and regional sports coverage.
Yeah, it's been incredible how our social media following has just exploded in basically the last 13 months. And if you like seeing highlights of all kinds of different sports, my radio days, it was basically football, basketball, and then I took it upon myself to go cover baseball. But now, field hockey, lacrosse, girls volleyball, boys volleyball, track and field.
Track and field.
Yeah, I'm kind of all over the place. Obviously, I love my hoops. Exeter has a real nice tournament coming up Friday and Saturday. If people want to stop over there, some teams from Philly are coming in. Allentown Central Catholic's coming in. BC will be there. Archbishop Carroll will be there from Philly. So that'll be a good one to stop by. But we put up a lot of clips of not me getting run over on the sideline, although some were close. But a lot of unique highlights of different high school games from all over the place.
Yes, and Justin and I appreciate you sending clips our way to show on Bulldog Hour.
Oh, yeah.
So I know Roman Catholic, we had some, I think, from Mifflin, so it was great.
Cheltenham.
It's Cheltenham, yeah. I with doing pictures, I don't have time to do the video, and we used to pull up the huddle tape, but it's just not the same.
It's not.
It
really
the sideline stuff is so much better.
Yeah.
So anytime that you send those over, we're very appreciative of being able to broadcast on the Bulldog Hour. So I think that's it, though, Paul. Again, thanks for joining me. And Justin and I will invite you back again here real soon to talk more pro football in the new year, believe it or not, in 2024, right around the corner.
Sounds good.
Justin and I will be back next week and the week after. We should have 2 more shows before we shut it down for the holidays, but we'll be back and better than ever in the new year. So I think that's it here for episode 387 of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. And Justin and I will be back in 1 week, December 10th, 8:30. Check us out at jmnjrradio.com and follow us across the social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all that good stuff. So for Paul Roberts, Justin Raffoff, and myself, thanks for listening, and we'll be back again in 1 week.
That's a wrap on this episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show, brought to you by Mays Sandwich Shop. Woo-hoo! You can watch each weekly episode live on Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube. Be sure to like, follow, or subscribe to the show on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play. You can also rate and review us on many of these platforms as well. We'd love to hear from you. Send your emails to the Mays Sandwich Shop inbox at joemaysandjraff@gmail.com. The Joe Mays and J-Raff Show is a part of the JMNJR Radio Network, home to other productions such as the Bulldog Hour, Tangents with Friends, and Nat Chats with Dad. Until next time.